Hi, welcome back. The Shroud of Turin. Is it real? Is it fake? Is it really the blood of Christ? And if it is, what blood type is that? Those are kind of questions that I find fascinating. I'm imagining that you do too, and that's the reason why you've clicked on this. I've been fascinated with the Shroud of Turin for most of my life. That watched many documentaries to prove or disprove the authenticity of it. In my mind, it's a real artifact. Let's just set that straight right here. It goes back to like the 15th century. It was in a cathedral in Turin. That's why they call it the Shroud of Turin. So that's where it has been. They believe that that shroud was the burial cloth of Jesus. That is what the legends of it is. And there's been a lot of debate. There's been a lot of testing on the shroud. Like I said, they believed at one time that they tested it and brought it back to like the 1200s. And well, then it couldn't have been Jesus's. But then they realized that there was a fire in the cathedral at one time, and the shroud was burnt on the outer edges. They could tell by doing testing to see where the burnt and scorched marks were. And the nuns at that time rewove the cloth and fixed the cloth. So they were testing that, and that was about the 12th century when they rewove that. So they did more testing on it later on, and in other areas, I don't know exactly where, but it wasn't on the edges. It was some of the original cloth, and that did take them back to Jesus's time. So the possibility of it being the burial cloth of Jesus is a probability because it is around that time. That doesn't mean it's an absolute, but what makes it a fascinating artifact is that you can only see a certain image when you take a picture and you look at the negative. In that image, you see a thorny crown that goes around, and there's blood stains. You can see berries on it and leaves of this thorny crown that they did. And we know, if you look back at Jesus's story, that was one of the things. They put a thorn crown on his head, saying, well, you think you are the Messiah, or you think you're God, here you go. So that's what they did. They put that when he was, before he was being crucified. The other thing is that it shows that the person was crucified, and which was quite common back in those days. They would crucify their criminals. So that didn't necessarily mean that it's Christ, but the way that he was crucified, it is consistent with what the Bible states of how Christ was crucified. But what makes it more miraculous and more special is the negative quality that you could see. Now they've tried to reproduce this, and they have not been able to. It's a form of radiation that happened to it, that it was like a blast of something that happened to the body. And the newest studies that I've seen talk about it, the way that the blood wasn't pooling, or the way that for so many years, they thought for decades it had to have been a painting. It couldn't have been true what they thought it was. It had to have been some type of weird paint that they were doing. But they've done tests, and they've denied that that is a possibility. It was real. And then they have found blood on it. And they've done the analysis on it. And that's where we are at. So for me, personally, I'm believing that this probably is, it's a miraculous cloth. It definitely had something to do with some miracle that happened. However you want to think that miracle happened, it seems to have been real. So for me, that really does say, okay, Now we're looking at something special. And then they've done them. This is interesting about the blood analysis. Now, I tried to go over it. I know I heard when it first came out, I wasn't paying attention to it about Rh negative or with myself at that time because I wasn't really exploring that. But I remember it coming out being AB Rh negative. But I've done a search on it and I can't find any of that evidence now. What I have found on just by searching and looking through documentaries and papers and stuff like that is that there was a cover-up. That's what is being stated. I know that I've seen it, but I have no evidence. I didn't save any of the articles, unfortunately. I'm sure that if you went through Reader's Digest or something like that, because I usually did cover those stories, it might be in print. But on the internet, it seems to have been washed. And that's kind of goes into a little bit of conspiracy right there. You know, really think about it. If all of these people remember, it's either that or it's the Mandela effect that's happening here. But now, if you take into my memory and other people's memories of this, that it was Rh negative, that's pretty interesting. And if this is Christ's blood, which the scientists that do the tests on it are pretty convinced of that, that this was something miraculous. It's just the people who want to write about it later on that have a totally biased opinion because they're not following the actual evidence that they're looking at. But then again, I mean, it may not be. It may be somebody else. Could have been John the Baptist, but he wasn't crucified, so it wouldn't have been him. But all of the pieces put together, it really does look like it's Christ. And then the blood type is AB negative. Now that's interesting. We know as Rh negative people that we have got on a whole quite special abilities, or most of us have types of mediumships, or empaths, can do some strange things, have had some strange experiences. So we know already that we're a little bit different, and to be able to get this confirmation that it comes from that line is, for me, quite encouraging. Now I've seen a bit of debates of people saying, well, no, if it was Christ's blood, it would have to be O because that would have been the first blood. I don't know. Like, he could have had one parent that was O. We don't know. Chances are he was an A or a B, his parents, because that's how it is. Or AB and a B or an A. Something along that lines that would produce an AB negative. But that really doesn't mean that the AB negatives are specially tied to Christ and are any better than anybody else. But what it does say is, now if you want to go into the Holy Grail, okay, now let's take a little different turn. What is the Holy Grail? Well, I should say the legend of the Holy Grail is that it was the chalice that Jesus drank of in his Last Supper, or even when they gave him something to drink when he was on the cross or the stake. It depends on what you believe. Or the other is that the Holy Grail is the bloodline of Christ. So if you're looking at it through the bloodline of Christ, so in other words, that theory goes into that he married Mary Magdalene and they had children, and that bloodline was carried on. So basically there would be a line of people that would have Christ's bloodline. And that doesn't mean that everybody who is Rh negative either is of Christ's bloodline. Because I'm sure that the time that Christ was, unless that blood was made right then, at that moment, which we know that is not true. That doesn't mean that everybody with Rh negative, AB Rh negative, has Christ lineage, but we would come from that lineage in the sense that whatever the lineage that he had that created that Rh negative AB would have been ours. But that doesn't mean we have direct descendant of Christ. I know everybody wants to say that. This is just my opinion. I'm just trying to use logical thinking as to all of this and a little bit of belief, because you can't come to any of this unless you believe that the possibility of it being Christ's burial cloth and being Christ's blood. So you have to take that leap of faith to begin with. So it is an exciting idea and exciting to make you feel like as if, you come from somebody that special, that miraculous. And with the gifts that we have, it feels like that could be the truth. But please do not use this as a tool against others, because it is just circumstantial evidence. Even though it's amazing circumstantial evidence, it still is. Okay, I'm going to leave you there. If you like this video, share it. If you like it, please put a like and a comment. If you disagree with me, that's fine. I'm exploring. I want to bring out my point of view of what I'm thinking, but that doesn't mean my point of view is going to stay this way with evidence when it comes. If it comes my way, I'm going to go with what my reasonable thinking is and the evidence. So I'm a explorer. I'm a truth seeker, and that is a never-ending thing. So stay in love and light, and see you next time.